Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. Ramadan is a time of fasting, but it can also be a time of feasting. Joining me to discuss how to eat and not eat during Ramadan is Nazima Qureshi. She's a registered dietitian and nutritionist. Nazima, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to be here.
You've been a long-time guest on the show, so we appreciate you coming on. Nazima, I want to ask you, why is nutrition so important in Ramadan?
Absolutely. So a lot of times when people think about healthy eating during Ramadan, they automatically think about weight loss. And while it's okay to have weight loss goals, Ramadan is a spiritual time. Ramadan is not a weight loss program. And so it's important to really think about your why, right? And so connecting that healthy eating to a more meaningful spiritual intention makes it a lot better. And so if you eat a lot better during that small non-fasting window, you'll feel more energized to essentially do more of what we want to do, more ibadah, more worship, more community work, right? We can only do that with more energy.
Nazima, from a nutritional point of view, how does fasting impact the body?
So fasting actually has a lot of health benefits. The benefit for us has been because of intermittent fasting becoming trendy, there has been so much research out there. So now we're seeing that obviously we do it for religious reasons, but there happen to be these health benefits. So one is obviously the weight loss, but also benefits to your cardiovascular health, as well as your brain health. So it actually shows fasting can help with improved memorization. So it's actually a great time for you to spend some time memorizing more Quran. And things like your blood sugar levels, your inflammatory markers, those also decrease.
Okay, Nazima, now let's talk about the day, the fasting day. You start with suhoor in the morning. How do you make sure that you get that energy from the suhoor to continue throughout the day fasting?
So the most important thing is to wake up for suhoor. I know a lot of times I think it's gotten a little bit easier for this year. It's not as early, but many people think, okay, you know what, I got to wake up for work anyway. Let me just catch up on my sleep because our sleep is compromised. However, suhoor, first of all, it is a sunnah. So we want to act on that. But this is your last opportunity to nourish yourself before starting your fast. If you're sleeping through suhoor, you're essentially doing a 24-hour fast, right? With only iftars. So do make sure you're waking up for suhoor. But a common mistake many people make is a very simple carby suhoor, so like a bowl of cereal. And so that will completely deplete. Your energy will be depleted by the time you start your day by 9, 10 a.m. And so that's why a lot of times people feel like, what's the point of me eating suhoor if I'm
Yes, because they're like, no matter what you eat, I think your energy is going to be depleted at some point in the day, right?
Exactly. So you may still feel hungry, but it's about kind of sustaining energy for as long as possible. So the carbs, we want to go for more whole grain carbs. So swapping the cereal for, say, oatmeal, swapping the white breads and rices for like a whole grain alternative, and then pairing that with some protein. So that could be like your egg, your yogurt, your meats, your chickens, and a little bit of healthy fat. So that could be avocado, or it could be the little bit of olive oil you cook it in. And then if you could pair either some veggies or fruit, that will provide you with some water content as well as those nutrients. Now, it may seem like I've given way too many components. It's a bit overwhelming to eat all of those things, but something simple as like an overnight oats or preparing some, egg muffins with the veggies included. It doesn't have to be a large quantity of food as long as you get the right quality.
So I'm guessing people shouldn't be eating biryani at suhoor, right?
Yes, that's probably going to leave you feeling really low energy and thirsty throughout the day. So maybe not those heavy foods.
What about Gatorade? That's a common one that people drink, right?
Yeah. So Gatorade. So a lot of times people turn to this for electrolytes. Now, the interesting thing with electrolytes is that's not something that everyone across the board needs, and actually it could be harmful. Thinking about the Muslim community, a lot of ethnicities are at higher risk for something like high blood pressure. So what are electrolytes? Electrolytes will usually have sodium, and a lot of them also have a lot of added sugar. So for someone who is fasting, is not necessarily following all the nutrition guidelines, they're getting ample amounts of sodium. So depleting your electrolytes is not a concern for the average Muslim person. The only time you do need to add in electrolytes would be if you're having an extremely long, like say summer fast, some parts of the world, you are very active where you're sweating. Then at that point, you may need to add in electrolytes. I wouldn't suggest something like, Gatorade or things because it's very high sugar. Something as simple as a pinch of sea salt and some lemon, half a lemon squeezed into water would help kind of replenish that.
So Nazima, do you think we should be drinking a lot of water at suhoor? How should we maintain hydration throughout the fasting day?
One way to think about it is you want to be drinking the same amount of water you would in a non-fasting day. Okay. So let's say 2 liters is the average amount. And so how do we kind of split that up? So at suhoor, you want to get about 500 to 750 ml. Doesn't mean you have to sit there chugging. So I would say give yourself some time to have suhoor, about 45 minutes to an hour. As soon as you wake up, start sipping on it, right? So as you're prepping suhoor and things like that, so you'll have enough time. And then next would be when you break your fast, iftar. When you break your fast, break it with some dates, a bigger glass of water, so about 500 ml, and then have a little bit of fruit. Go pray your maghrib, and then you're going to sit down for your iftar meal. When you're having your iftar meal, at that time, you don't want to focus on too much water because you don't want to feel too bloated and have too much water in there. So at that time, just focus on your meal. If you need to do a few sips of water, but you don't necessarily need to. Then it's really that post-iftar time. So maybe about an hour after until your bedtime, then you want to catch up on the remainder. I think it ends up being a little less than a liter. You want to catch up on that water intake. So if you maintain that, you feel pretty good, and a lot of those kind of negative symptoms of headaches and things like that will help. And especially considering we're fasting for 30 days straight, that dehydration, if you miss those days, it starts blending into each other and it kicks in really quickly.
I want to ask you about coffee and caffeine, because people really miss that during Ramadan, and they try to figure out how to fit it in. And then they get headaches when they can't drink their morning coffee, right? So what advice do you have for people like that?
Absolutely. So with caffeine, it's a very common trigger to result in headaches. So figuring out where you want to input it, right? So at suhoor, if you are staying up after suhoor, you could essentially have caffeine there. Now, one key thing to do is not have coffee be the last thing that you drink, because it dries out your mouth. So you can still have your coffee in that morning time, but just make sure you're taking a few sips of water just so that you don't have a dry mouth starting your fast, because that could be quite challenging. Another time it would be at iftar time is to have that caffeine. But the problem with that is it could impact your nighttime sleep. So I know a lot of people will say, like, I can drink a cup of coffee and go to sleep, but it'll impact your quality of sleep. So how deep your sleep gets. And because our sleep is already compromised in Ramadan, you want to be mindful. So you can try and, switch to, say, if you're a regular coffee drinker, switch to a tea. That will decrease the caffeine amount. If you're a tea drinker, maybe switch to like a green tea, a little bit less, or switch to decaf options.
What other advice do you have to reduce headaches? Because they might not arise just because of caffeine, right? It might just be you have a headache because you're fasting.
Actually, it's not necessarily it's because of fasting. It's generally because of what's happening in that non-fasting window.
Okay.
So I think all around we generally associate all of these like symptoms to fasting.
Yes.
But I think it's actually what you are doing in that non-fasting window that is causing all of these issues. So with headaches, dehydration is a common, right? So if you're not drinking that amount of water, by the 4th, 5th day, those headaches are going to kick in. Another common one would be the caffeine. So if you're having caffeine withdrawals, those headaches will kick in. A third option would be if you're having like really high sodium, high fried foods, what you eat the night before will impact your fast the next day. So a lot of times post Tarawih, like people will have, they'll have desserts and they'll have fried items, all that stuff. It feels great at nighttime, but you don't feel that great the next fast. So that's another thing to keep in mind is what are you eating at that nighttime? That's going to affect your next day. And then the last piece is also your sleep. So because your sleep is being compromised, that could also result in headaches. And so I think, just accepting that our sleep will be compromised in Ramadan, but maybe try and squeeze in an app sometime during the day, add in some physical activity, light physical activity like walks will help kind of help with those headaches.
Nazima, I want to ask you about iftar, because it's the most exciting part of a fasting person's day, but it's also a time when we tend to be very extravagant and splurge on what we eat. And sometimes we gain weight as a result, right?
Yeah.
So, the samosas, the fried food, the sweet foods. How can we maintain all those cultural traditions that we love, but also be nutritious in Ramadan?
Yeah, I think going into our iftars day after day, first is really thinking about what is the purpose of fasting, right? Especially given everything that's happened around the world, I think that's really allowed us to really slow down for a moment and think about it,
yes.
right? And so after a long day of fasting, it's one thing if we celebrate on Eid and we have that feast, but is Ramadan really about having 30 feasts? And so I think really thinking about your intention, just doing that first really makes a big difference. Now, with that being said, I think it is important to still incorporate your cultural foods, and we shouldn't just completely eliminate that all, but it's doing it in a mindful way. So I would suggest rather than opening your fast with all the fried foods and those heavy items, just date, water, fruit. pray your Maghrib Salah and then sit down to eat. And so just slowing down that opening of your fast, what it does is it makes your body more in tune with the fact that now you've consumed food versus if you break your fast and you start eating, you're eating at a faster pace than your body is able to register that you've eaten. And so that's why a lot of times, like, you're not actually feeling full, but 30 minutes later it kicks in and you're like, oh
then
my
you're
God.
in a food coma.
Yeah, and then it happens for 30 days straight. You're doing this every single day. So just kind of slowing that down is eating after Maghrib. You've already had a little bit of dates, water, fruit. You'll notice you're still hungry, but you're not at that high level of like extreme hunger. And then sit down and make your plate once, right? So whatever cultural foods you have, think about your protein, think about your carbs. If you want to have your samosas or spring rolls, count that towards your carbs, right? Rather than you're also having rice, you're also having bread, you're having so many different types. Be mindful of what you're putting on your plate. And then incorporate veggies. I feel like that's usually missing across all cultures.
Yes.
So whether it's a salad or roasted veggies, just have some veggies. That will really help with the digestive issues, which is another Ramadan, symptom that a lot of people don't talk about. But those digestive symptoms come in when we don't have enough fiber. So make your plate once, right? Rather than just constantly making your plate again and again, which results in overeating. And I think that will really make a big difference.
So very quickly, samosas. Yes. What's your verdict on that?
So people like to call me the samosa police, but I promise I'm not. So every year I do share this infographic online where it's if you do 3 samosas a day, that's 90 samosas in a month. And if you think about that, if I imagine like any other month, it's like, hey, you can have 90 samosas. That's a lot, right? And then we add in the other, like, let's say spring rolls, all the fried items. So on average, a Muslim person can be having hundreds of fried items in a month. So what I would say is, at least just limit to 1 a day, right? And that results in 30 fried items or samosas in the month, which is still quite a bit.
Yes.
So you can still enjoy. I say a samosa a day keeps the dietitian away, right? So,
Nazima, what about families that are very busy, and big families? What advice do you have for them to meal plan, have nutritious meals throughout Ramadan, given their busy schedules?
Right. I think one thing is kind of what is the biggest challenge that you have with your meal and prepping that. So protein is one of the things that's like, that gets left behind, or those veggies. So prepping that, having your fridge stocked with those items so it makes it easier. A lot of the prep, unfortunately, becomes, prepping all the fried items and prepping. And so if that's what you have, it's going to make it really challenging. The other thing is eating healthy is for all ages in the family, right? We often think, oh, it's someone who has a condition or they're following a diet, which is why they should eat healthy. No, it should be for everyone and it could still be enjoyable, right? So taking some time out to make your cultural dishes healthy and enjoyable so that everyone at the table is enjoying Ramadan, but also making healthy choices.
Nazima, so wonderful to have you here. I feel like we could talk for another hour and still have so much to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiya and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.